Some of the current challenges today with disk space issues result from systems not being able to add sufficient information to the disk. So if you're filling up databases that ultimately rely on server storage, log files, or any number of things can lead to disk space being used up on a particular system. In order to either alleviate that through deleting stuff, which you may or may not want to do, also adding to it requires very manual actions that also require you to have high-level access. So you do need a very high-level access to be able to add to a particular existing disk on a virtual machine. You also need administrative access to that virtual machine to be able to go in and expand out a disk space. And you also have to have the technical knowledge in order to know which disk belongs to which particular virtual disk when it relates from a VM to a system. Today we're going to show you a demonstration of how Resolve can alleviate a lot of these issues. This is a demonstration of how we can leverage Resolve's automation in order to perform disk functions which can help alleviate issues with disk space, or if I simply want to add a new particular disk for storage reasons or any other reason that you might have. So we're going to start out the demonstration by specifying the information that's going to be required in order to add a new disk to a virtual machine. So here's the host that we're going to create it in. We're going to create the directory, the logical volume group, as applications, as we'll just call the logical volume group APPL. And now that I have the required information, I'm going to execute the process. And the process that we are executing, we can see here, we are first going to do the interactions with VMware in order to add the disk itself, but we're going to perform some functions around it in order to determine the name of the one that was just added. So if I go look at this particular system, I can see here that we have created hard disk 2, and it's the 20 gig size that we had specified. Now we have the information we need in order to connect to the Linux server and interact via command line access. So now we're going to get the devices in order to map the virtual machine disk to the actual device on the server itself. We now have all the information we need in order to create the volume groups, the physical volume, and then we can create the file system itself. We'll make the directory and finally mount that new file system into that specific directory. Looking at the server, earlier I ran disk command to determine what disks are there, what sizes there are, and all the information. I will execute it again, and now that we have added the new disk, we can see that we have a mount point for apps, and I can see that we have the application as the logical volume group, or the volume group and the logical volume itself. From the execution of the automation itself, here I can see the individual results that came back as Resolve executed each task in the process flow that we saw. We've gathered all that information. There's where we determined the new hard disk in VMware was hard disk 2. I found the new physical volume of dev SDB on the Linux server itself. And then we went through the process to create the volume groups, the logical volume, and then ultimately carried out creating the file system and finally mounting the file system so it would be available for use. So here's the first part of the demonstration where we can add a new virtual disk to VMware and then have it created on the server itself. Now that we have created a new disk, we're going to go through the next process to be able to expand the disk. This might be an activity that you commonly have automatically driven from an event, from an incident, even from a change request. We have two different options here. The first one, to expand it, is more from the perspective of somebody looking at the server from vCenter, where you would be able to go into that particular server. So my disk Linux server in here, I can be able to view, and then we can say, you know, if I were to expand it from editing that particular device, or to extend it, is more from a server perspective. So in this case, again, I'm going to specify my server. The mount point that we created previously was /apps, and the additional size that I would like to add is 15 gigabyte. So now I'm going to trigger this particular step in the process. And if I actually bring up the automation that we're going to trigger, we can be able to view the automation. And the automation is a little bit different than the initial one, but it follows a similar process. However, the first part of the process is to gather all of the information from the Linux server itself, which ultimately gives me the device mapping that I can use to then go into VMware so that I know which disk I want to be able to expand. So that then enables you to select, whether it's hard disk 1 or 2. In this case, it's going to then pull up this hard disk 2. And going back to the automation that we had executed from Resolve, we can see those results that we have gathered as far as the execution goes. I found the logical volume is in group applications. I found the actual physical device as SDB. I found the SCSI, so the mapping of where the drive is at, which then allows me to go into VMware to find that it was hard disk 2. Here we've computed the actual capacity with the new capacity, so that allows us to expand that hard disk. And then now that we have completed those set of steps in VMware, we can go back to the server itself, and we can then rescan the volume. We can see that it went from 20 to 35. So the OS Linux has picked up on the VM files being changed. So then we can get the block information, which allows us to then resize the physical volume, resize the logical volume, and ultimately then be able to complete the process. So we can be able to see here that our disk has gone from 20 up top down to 35 there, just above the bottom line. And the OS now recognizes that we have expanded the disk out that 15 gig that was requested. So again, this can be user driven, which removes all of the swivel chair, or we can also have it automatically driven.